Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see you all here. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name's Unsog, and I'm one of the church members here at Myton. It's a great thing to be able to ask questions. We live in a world that's full of mysteries, stuff that we don't know the answers to. Stuff like exactly how many stars are there in the universe? What is the purpose of dreams when we're asleep? Will Disney continue making live-action adaptations? Should Disney continue making live-action adaptations? It can be fun to think about things like these. Other times, we can come across questions, big questions, that might hit a little closer to home, with answers that might be less comfortable to think about. Today, I'd like us to think about a topic that many of us might have struggled with at some point in our lives. I certainly have and do. The question of self-worth. Am I good enough? Or if not, will I ever be good enough? Here at Myton Church, we don't claim to have all the answers, but as Christians, we believe that God cares about our questions and has provided guidance for us through the words of the Bible. So, in the next hour or so, we'll break down the question of being good enough, think about some of the issues around the topic, and take a look at what the Bible has to say on the matter. Over the course of the evening, we'll have opportunities to chat in our groups through some discussion questions, which means I get to do less work and you get to take a break from me listening, so it's a win-win situation for everybody. And we'll also have some time at the end for some questions, which I'll do my best to answer. The title, next slide, please. The title of this evening's talk features the term Imposter Syndrome. So perhaps it would be helpful to think about how we might define it. It's become quite a common phrase, also known as the imposter phenomenon or fraud syndrome. Now, it is worth saying that I'm not a psychologist or a neurologist or any kind of ologist, so I can't offer much expertise on that front. There's definitely a lot of literature out there regarding the topic, and some of it's really, really helpful. But today, I'd like us to hear what God might have to say about imposter syndrome. As such, we'll be approaching this question primarily from a biblical perspective. So, if you came along to this talk expecting deep scientific insights, can I be the first to apologize on behalf of whoever invited you along to this talk? It's all a bit embarrassing, but I think they got the wrong information. I'm afraid you're just going to have to do with me on this occasion. But I do have the privilege of counting some actual psychologists among my friends, and I have confirmed with them that imposter syndrome is a real behavioral health phenomenon. And you don't need to be a psychologist to be familiar with the reality of wrestling with those kinds of intrusive thoughts. What if I'm just a big disappointment? What if no matter what I do, I'm just not cutting it? Those with imposter syndrome are needled by the persistent belief that they are not good enough to meet the expectations of the people around them. So they live in constant fear of being found out. Now, this experience of inadequacy can come from many different places and in many shapes and forms. It can range from the occasional anxious thought to long periods of crippling self-doubt. It can also happen in lots of different situations. It might be that you have colleagues at work who are always praising you for what an excellent job you do, how hard you work, and what a difference you make to the workplace. But you feel the need to say it's nothing, that it's all part of the job, when in reality you're working overtime just to keep up with your results. It's much better, surely, than dropping the ball and disappointing everyone. Or it could be that you have friends at school who love hanging out with you, and they say so. But you can't shake that fear that one day they might not find you as fun or as witty to be around, because that's who you've been hiding all this time. Perhaps you have family or loved ones who say how proud they are of you, what a kind person you are. And to you, it's all a lie. They don't know what you're really like, so you need to try even harder, be even kinder, commit even further to the lie, and maybe, just maybe, the lie might one day become the truth. In other words, imposter syndrome is where we are hounded by the question of, will I ever be good enough? Relentlessly chasing after the hope that the answer will one day be yes, while terrified that the answer might actually be no. What will it take for us to reach a point where we can be satisfied with who we are? What will it take for us to be, without any doubt, truly good enough? Well, first, it might be worth figuring out the exact nature of our destination, the good enough. What does good enough actually look like? An excellent question, which is why I thought it'd be great to discuss it in our groups. So, if we go to the next slide, please. How might we define what is good and how much is enough? Sorry, previous slide. My bad. So we'll take a few minutes just to chat through these in our groups, and then we'll come back together. Shall we come back together? So just from the kind of little snatches of conversation I was hearing just while I was kind of figuring out if I could get this to work, I think based on like the different conversations and what I've been hearing, it's safe to say that pinning down a single definition of what good enough is can actually be quite complicated. And in fact, I'd like us to go a step further and think about the possibility that the idea of being good enough might actually be an impossible standard. So that's our first point, an impossible standard. As you might have found in your discussions, when we look at what it means to be good, there seems to be more than one possible answer. It might be got to do with, it might have to do with having good achievements. It's about winning prizes, getting top marks, beating out the competition to land that job, that promotion, that pay rise, that retirement. That all genuinely sounds pretty good. Or it might be about having good morals, doing what's right, keeping the law, paying taxes on time, being honest with others. I don't think anyone would contest that these are good things. It might be about good looks. Now, I'm not married, but I have it on good authority that husbands telling their wives that they look nice is a good thing. And perhaps wives might say to their husbands, well, at least you tried. It's good to be beautiful, to dress well, and be healthy. Or maybe it's about good skills. Maybe being good is about being good at stuff, being competent and intelligent, being skilled at sports or music or academia or business. It is good to pursue excellence in what we do. Or maybe it's about having a good personality, being likable, having empathy and compassion for others, reaching out to them when they're having a hard time. They sound like the traits of a good person. Already, we have quite a few, and there have been even more that I haven't mentioned here that you might have talked about in your groups. So if these are all good, then how much of these are necessary for it to be good enough? It could be about quality, that there's some kind of a particular standard we need to reach. If it's about skills, how skilled do we need to be before we're considered good enough at what we do? How will you know you've reached the acceptable level? A couple of months ago, by some amazing coincidence, I bumped into a parent of a former schoolmate from my primary school days many years ago. And the reason he remembered me wasn't, for some reason, because of my name. There wasn't any other Unsog in primary school at that time. But because he recalled I was what he called a music prodigy, which was very kind. And at the knowledgeable age of 10, I also thought I was pretty good. But later, I moved to a specialist music school, and suddenly I was distinctly mediocre, perhaps even below average. How much is good enough? Perhaps good enough is about quantity. All the good things that we just talked about, how many of them do we need to get right for it to be enough? Maybe 2 or 3. It might be measured in how many accolades we earn, how much wealth we accumulate, how many friends or followers or likes we have. As of this morning, the top 5 most followed people on Instagram are Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, Selena Gomez, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Kylie Jenner. I actually did have to look that up properly because I don't really know about these sort of things. But each of them, apparently, have around 300 to 600 million followers. Is that what it takes to be good enough? Or maybe it's something got to do with longevity. We might get it right from time to time, but if you're only occasionally honest, well, then I don't think we'd really consider that morally reliable. We expect good people to be moral at least most of the time. So then we need to know how long we need to keep it up for. Maybe 51% of the time is enough? Or 60, even 70? If being good enough is about looks, then we're in a bit of a pickle, because over time, our appearances change, and the standards of beauty in our world are also constantly shifting. How long does our goodness need to last for it to be enough? Already, we're starting to see the possibility of defining good enough status becoming harder to grasp. We sense this vagueness, and it makes us nervous. We're like tourists lost in a foreign country without a clue where we are or how to speak the language. We vaguely remember the name of the hotel we've booked, but have no idea how to pronounce it, so we can't even ask for directions. Similarly, we know we want to be good enough, but we aren't able to pin down whether we'll get there, or if we know for sure what it even looks like. Without some kind of consensus, some kind of definitive signpost, we are at a bit of a loss. So, a chance to discuss again in our groups. How can we know for sure what good enough is and how to get there? So, I'll give you another few minutes to talk about that, then we'll come back together. You might be familiar with the phrase, the blind leading the blind. If you're not, you're looking at Exhibit A. Like lots of others, this idiom comes from one of the teachings of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 24, he calls the Pharisees blind guides. As the Jewish religious leaders of the time, the Pharisees were responsible for keeping God's laws and teaching others to follow suit. But instead, they obsessed over man-made traditions while ignoring many of God's actual commandments. This is what Jesus is referring to when he accuses them of straining out a gnat but swallowing a camel. They agonize over tiny issues but are completely blind to what's truly important. Jesus called them out on this blindness, warning that if the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. It's common sense that if you can't see, you probably want someone who can see to lead the way. If you're lost, you want to ask someone who actually knows where to go for directions. If you had someone just as lost as you taking the lead, well, it's clearly going to be a recipe for disaster. One of my fondest stories of my few outdoor escapades is one that happened on the Peak District. Me and my two brothers and I decided that it would be a good idea to plan an excellent walk through the Peak District. The weather was kind of a British grey. The conditions were perfect. And we had a route charted, and we thought maybe this route kind of goes a little bit around the long way. There is a route straight across the moors that just takes us exactly where we need to go as the crow flies, completely ignoring that we're not crows, but we thought, straight ahead, that's the way to go. Several hours, much more land, and one broken shoe later, we were deeply regretting our decision and wondered why, when none of us knew the Peak District and none of us knew where to go, all three of us had decided to ignore the faithful map and try trekking on our own. I've never been back to the Peak District since. The problem is that Peak District experience is exactly what happens in our pursuit for self-worth. We suffer from a universal tendency to put our fate into the hands of the blindest guides available, ourselves. The way this works is through what I'd like to call the opinion chain. The first link is value, specifically our value, our sense of worth. When we want to be good enough, what we really want is to have lasting satisfaction in who we are, to have confidence and security in our true value. The second link is opinion. For better or worse, our sense of value is impacted by opinions, whether they belong to other people or whether the opinion is our own. How valued we feel is tied to what we think of ourselves and what other people think of us. Just on an aside, what is often presented as an answer to imposter syndrome and a sense of self-worth is to not listen to what other people have to say and just say, I am enough for myself. But the fact of the matter is, we live in a world where we are colliding with other people. What other people do and think matter to us because they affect our lives. It's very, very difficult, I would say impossible, to completely divorce ourselves from the opinions of others, and unless we live in a vacuum, to leave what they say and leave their opinions completely sort of separate from how they impact our own opinion of ourselves. Now, the third link of the chain is nature. As much as we might like to think they are, our opinions are not necessarily based on fact. Or in fact, they're not necessarily fact. They might be based on facts that we've heard and influenced by people we respect and trust, but they are ultimately reflections of our own thoughts and feelings. We might call this our nature. And it is this third link from which trouble arises. None of us can say in our heart of hearts that we have a definitive grasp of what is good. From some of the discussions that I was hearing, there was a frequent mention of this idea of a scale. It kind of goes up and down, like where's the standard? It might be this for here, it might be there for there. It's really hard to pin down exactly what good is, let alone claim to have a nature that's good enough to speak with authority on how to achieve it. If you're anything like me, you'd only need to look back a few weeks, or maybe even just a few days, a couple of hours, to find evidence of times when you lost your rag, or ignored important work, or messed up in some way. We are often blind to what is good, and the Bible recognizes this. It is laid out painfully, but clearly in Romans chapter 3. There is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who does good, not even one. We are not reliable judges of the good in ourselves or in that of others, because our own human nature is innately not good. Yet, it is from this innately flawed human nature of ours that our opinions are generated, and they are generated at a furious rate. Whether it is others' opinions or our own, we are all blind guides, churning out blind opinions like a war machine that assaults our sense of value and worth. Having found ourselves in this impossible situation, with a standard that is impossible to reach, where can we find a hope for a yes to the question, will I ever be good enough? The amazing news is, where we can't see a way to be good enough, God makes us good enough through his Son, making the impossible standard wonderfully possible. And that's our second point. An impossible standard made possible in Jesus. If we go back to our opinion chain, we are presented with a pretty grim picture. We have an unreliable nature, and that unreliable nature keeps on bringing out unreliable opinions, and that leads to an unreliable value. But if the opinion giver has a different nature, if they are completely and undeniably qualified to give a truly reliable opinion, well, that's a different matter. Now, I mentioned before that I'm not a scientist, but what I am is a composer. And one of the times in my life where I felt this imposter syndrome most intensely was when I, by some miracle, managed to get into Oxford after lots of failures. And having worked really, really hard to get into Oxford to study composition, I was terrified that there'd been some kind of clerical error, that there was some kind of unsog, that they just made a mistake. Maybe they spelled my name wrong. It happens often. And that one day they're going to just double check their records and just be like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're not really meant to be here. And so I figured, now that I'm in Oxford and I'm an Oxford composer, I need to write Oxford standard music. I need to write music the way, I don't know, Oxford people expect me to write. There must be some kind of language, something really, really clever and impressive. And so I spent the first 2 semesters slaving away at writing really weird music because I thought that's what was impressive. And one day I met up with my tutor, and he said something like, I get that you're really clever, and it's all very impressive, but I think I'd like to hear what music you want to write. I was a bit confused because I thought I was writing some pretty good music. But then I just wrote a piece of my own, something that I liked, and he said, there, I can hear you in that music. That is excellent. And from that moment, I didn't need to doubt myself, because here was a world-class composer, someone whose music had been approved and won prizes all over the world. Well, as long as he said that my music was good, I mean, he was far more qualified than me to talk about how good I was at composing. His opinion trumped mine, and quite frankly, anyone else's. Isn't it amazing, the idea that we might be able to not be at the mercy of others' evaluation or that of our own insecurities? Now, we might not have confidence in our own abilities, but then we have someone else who's set far more qualified to say, you're good enough. Now, imagine that it's not about whether you're a good composer or a good student, but whether you are a good person. You are good enough. You would need someone qualified in all those areas to provide that judgment, that stamp of approval. Someone who knows everything about you. Someone who is immensely, infinitely good. Someone who has the authority to speak into your goodness and say, yes, 100%. The incredible thing is that the only person in the universe who can claim such a status has said, you are more than enough. So if we look at the opinion chain, it is completely turned over. So we start with the nature of the opinion giver. So here, the opinion giver isn't unreliable. His nature is full of perfect knowledge, perfect goodness, perfect authority. There is no one more qualified than him to give an opinion on anything. And his opinion is that next slide, please. Yeah. And his opinion, therefore, is conclusive and undeniable. Because he is the supreme opinion giver, no other opinion trumps it. His judgment is final. And what does that result in? What does that say about our value? If he says, you are good enough, that's it. We can have total and eternal security in our worth. In 1 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul provides a model of what this might look like. He says, I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Paul is not saying that he is perfect. In fact, he says in somewhere else in the Bible, in 1 Timothy, that of all sinners, he is chief. He considers himself the worst of all sinners. So he recognizes his flaws. He recognizes his innately not good nature. However, it is not his opinion that matters. It is not the opinion of others that matters. It is the opinion of God. And once God has given his opinion, once God has given his view, that is all he needs to worry about. And so, he can be free. He can live a life liberated. We can pursue excellence. We can try to be good at our jobs. We can try to be really good at pottery painting, or we can try to be good at sports. We can try to win at our competitions. We can try to get those top marks. We can try to be kind. We can make those efforts, but not because we're earning our way to something. It's because we're already there, and we use that as a foundation, and we use that to celebrate the fact that we have been declared good enough. And the way in which that we have been declared good enough is through Jesus. You see, we, having recognized that we are innately not good in our nature, have been given the nature of someone who is truly perfectly good. And that is Jesus, God himself, who came down to make himself one of us. He made himself mortal so that he might be able to sacrifice, to be able to turn over our sins, pay the price that we cannot pay, and to give us the nature that we cannot earn. If you're here and you haven't heard of this gift, or you've yet to accept it, can I say again how glad we are to have you, and it's so great to see you here, and to urge you to think about what it means to receive this gift, to think about what it's like to live free of the evaluations of others, which are constantly changing, constantly unreliable, where the voice in your head can be your own worst enemy, where you can live liberated. And if you're here and you consider yourselves having already received that gift and accepted that gift, and that you're following Christ, well, rejoice. Enjoy the freedom that you've been given. Sometimes, and I am chief among the ones that I know, we might unconsciously live as if we're not sure that the gift has been completely confirmed. We might live like there's still things that we need to do, things that we need to earn, things that we need to make our way towards, that we might be good enough, but are we good enough? And I want to tell you that yes, you are. Not from my flawed opinion, or not from the opinions of anyone else, but from the opinion of the only person in the universe who matters, the creator of the universe.